Today, we're looking at Birmingham Pen Company's Edward T. Steele Coal Works. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Birmingham Pen Company's Edward T. Steele Coal Works is a black ink. Now, to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into a different pen per day. I then put it into a Levenger TrueWriter with a broad nib to take my notes for this video. Before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is a chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see kind of a holdout line across the bottom that's a bit greenish gray, and it works its way up towards a light purple and a dark purple line across the very top, and that's where we're getting that nice dark black from. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. Now that line across the bottom shows a whole lot more permanence and hold around on this ink, which we'll see more of in the resistance. But other than that, we see very much the same thing as the other one. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pens. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, we see that it does reactivate and spread out. It didn't become completely illegible, which is good news, but I am a little worried about how much the capital H started to go away. Looking at the water, we see that there's some reactivation and some lifting off the page, but a majority of this ink is left behind, which makes me feel like water might not be enough to get rid of it. Pen Flush did exactly the same thing water did. It didn't remove anything more. This is a little worrisome to me because what I'm looking at is whether or not I would have to go more aggressive at getting this ink out. When Pen Flush doesn't work well, it usually means try it in an inexpensive pen before you try it in your expensive pens. Now, bleach is really removing it from the page, but not all of it from the page. We see this kind of yellowing left behind, and it's kind of a tan color. It just means that there's a lot more keeping this ink in place. Just be cautious. Try it with an inexpensive pen first. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Birmingham Pen Company's Edgar T. Steele Works Coal Black has a viscosity of 1.49, which makes it a very wet ink. To find my dry times, I averaged my writing samples done on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper with the extra fine and medium nib. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Birmingham Pen Company's Edgar T. Steele Works Coal Black has an average dry time of 15 seconds, which makes it a very normal dry time. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and like every one of these sample forms, get it from over here, it makes a mess when inking. Be prepared. Be warned. I wish they had a couple colors that were really sort of their standout. You have to get it, so that people would have a need to get it in a larger bottle and not these samples. Because I have really grown to hate these bottles. Yeah. But look at how thick that ink is. I mean, it's got it completely coated, and it just won't move. So it's a nice thick ink. Let's look at the... Oh, I'm sorry. To keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. That is just a super loose. That's what happens when you disassemble them 97,000 times writing and cleaning inks. I might have to replace that pen one day. Doubt it. I mean, it's my standard one. Why would I change it? Let's look at the Clairefontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does give some shading, but that's because when it goes down and it's light, it's like a gray. It's more like a gray. Not a black, a gray, and then it goes towards black. There we go. The 1 point, or the extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shading. It's a black ink. I'm not going to hold that against them. 9 seconds to dry. Medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 13 seconds to dry. The scrubby shows us we're not going to get any color variation. You don't expect color variation with black inks. I'm not expecting a lot here. The smear, you could probably recover it. So we look at Tomoe River. No bleeding, we do have ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread. It does give us some haloing because it's not coming through as black, it's coming through as gray. It's like a pencil gray. It's graphite. It's not coal black, it's graphite gray. And I like working in pencil. I work in pencil a lot. That's what I do a lot. You know, I do all my drawing. Most of my art I really like doing in pencil. I'm just experimenting drawing in ink lately. That's gray. No real shading in that writing, no sheen. The extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 16 seconds to dry. The medium has a noticeably darker tone with no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 23 seconds to dry. The scrubby shows us we're not going to get any color variation. We didn't get any color variation. The smear, you don't get to recover it. So I went and looked at Rhodia paper. Rhodia gave us no bleeding, no ghosting. I think that's just a spot from underneath, or an odd spot on the paper. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does give us some shading because it's going from that gray to black. So if you want this to shade, use it in a stub. Extra fine, noticeably darker tone. It's black again. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 11 seconds to dry. The medium has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 17 seconds to dry. Noticeably darker tone than the extra fine. The scrubby for both show us no color variation. We didn't expect any. We didn't get any. The smear test says you could likely recover it, and I believe you could. I put this down with a, oh, and I didn't even write it. Oh no, I gotta write it at the bottom. I wrote this with a Levenger True Writer Broad. It's a nice wet pen. I gotta write that at the bottom. I always write my pens. And that's because if I was to ever actually look at reviewing a pen, then I could go back and see all the inks that I've written with that pen and see if it did well, not just on my testing ink, but on basically whatever random ink came up. So I tested this with Levenger paper. Levenger paper gave us no bleeding, no ghosting, because Levenger does make some very nice paper, just with very thin lines. Thicker lines, Levenger. Everybody should write Levenger and say, you have great paper, but your lines are too thin. Or mess with them and tell them you want their lines even thinner. I don't know. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does show shading because it is that gray to black that's going on with the stub. The extra fine and medium, the same dark tone that's noticeably darker than the gray that we got with the 1.1. Extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 8 seconds to dry. It's a perfectly good black ink. It's just another black ink. Medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 11 seconds to dry. Scrubby shows us no color variation. We didn't get any. We didn't expect any. The smear says you could likely recover it. So I tested black and red paper, which gave us no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 had no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Yes, it shows us shading because it's just going down so thin. I don't know why, but it's going down super thin from the stub. The extra fine, noticeably darker tone
With no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 7 seconds to dry. Strangely, the medium on this paper is a noticeably darker tone again. With no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 10 seconds to dry. The scrubby for it shows us in both that we don't get any color variation, and we didn't. The smear, I don't think you could recover this. So being a working class type thing they're doing with the Steelworks, I put this on the Elon job notebook. These are notebooks that are made for when you're a contractor and you're doing one job for this client and then one job for this client, and you could have 3 jobs going. You have 3 different notebooks. You keep all of your notes, all of everything in one notebook. I wish they would make nicer paper. I really like it because their little notebooks have like 8 pages in them, which makes them great for contractors. Not great for fountain pens though, because if you look at that, it did not bleed through and touch the page below, but it bled all over where it made the backside unusable. We don't have any ghosting, but we can't use that side. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. It is that gray, but it has no shade. The extra fine has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 2 seconds to dry. It is darker than what we got with the 1.1, but it's way lighter than what showed up on any other one, on any other paper. Same thing happens to the medium. It's way lighter than what we got on other papers, but it is noticeably darker than the extra fine. Once we got to the medium, we do have feathering all over the place. Tons of it. Every bird that exists is on this page. There's that many feathers. It does have some spread. It has no halo, no sheen, no shade. It only took 3 seconds to dry. The scrubby shows us we're not going to get any color variation. We didn't. The smear test says you could likely recover it. I believe it. I still like these notebooks. I just wish they used a little bit better, but I do realize that for the most part people are writing in pen or in pencil and ballpoint on it. That's all that I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Birmingham Pen Company's Edgar T. Steelworks Coal Black, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now this is a very dark black, so I went with a much more vibrant red, Diamine's Poppy Red. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Birmingham Pen Company's Edgar T. Steel Coal Black? I think the performance that you're going to get in terms of its color largely depends on the nib and flow of the pen that you're using. Now, if you're using a much finer, drier pen, you get more of a gray than black, which isn't something I like in my blacks. I like my blacks to be very black. But if you're using a very wet pen, whether it's an extra fine or a broad, you get much more black. So know what you're getting with your pen before you set out on your whole day. Thanks for watching.